Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? Yeah, God, no. God, no. And tonight, we ain't going to make it that much normal. So, yeah, just as always, we never do, but I like to warn y'all. Because I have a guest tonight, as always, and that guest is Tim Bair, author with a very interesting story to tell us. And I had to get him on the show. I had to. Once I read his bio, I was like, I need to talk to this man. So here we are. And Tim, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Can't complain too much. It's been a decent day.
Good.
So just to start us off, what got you into the spiritual world that you write about?
Um, what really launched me into what we're doing now is my wife passed away about 8 years ago, 7.5 years ago. Um, we had been really close, um, and and when she passed away, we just knew we'd be able to be together still. And the short story is we are. I'm still living a life with someone whose um, body is not on this planet.
Which will, yeah, well, I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later. But
Yeah.
so in your earlier life, before 8 years
Sure.
ago, did you believe in life after death? Did you believe in ghosts and spirits and all that good stuff?
Um, the terminology was always a challenge for me. I was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian household. Um, however, the way my family raised me, it was all based on behavior. There was really no faith involved. Um, and I found myself right out of high school getting married, having kids, and my life kind of just floundered around. I didn't really know what to do. Then in about 1990, we moved. My first wife, and I moved from Ohio to California, and wound up in a church in Lancaster, California. And this group of five families got together and started hanging out together, going on vacations, doing all sorts of things. And that is when my wife of 20 some years and I found each other. We were both married, um, and it was quite a challenge. I don't. Our spiritual life began actually when we actually got our divorces and started worrying about where our children's lives were headed, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, of course.
we saw that the lifestyle that we had chosen previously um, was headed for some real generational problems. Um, our kids were not being raised in loving relationships. Uh, her her first husband was physically abusive. My relationship with my first wife was emotionless, and our kids were just not surviving well. They were doing poorly, and so through a series of life altering events, um, loss of a job, finding out my daughter had been molested by my cousin, my life just imploded. And the only friend that I knew to talk to was Marilyn, the person I ended up marrying and living my life with. And through that process, we kind of let go of the religious beliefs and started a very spiritual life. And it, when we first came together, it was obvious to us and to everyone around us that we had shared something previously. It just made sense that our lives did not begin when we physically met.
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of those just instant like connections where you could tell that there was
That,
something there before it even happened.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing was our then spouses recognized it. All of our friends recognized it. It was something that was meant to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it was kind of destiny or fate that you two would meet up again.
Yeah, it was. We did not have a particular belief in past lives or previous lifetimes, but we shared so many things in common. The way we saw the world, what we enjoyed, everything. Um, it was there were some really strange flashback moments to things that were not in our current lifetime.
Which makes, I mean, I don't know if you're a believer in this, but I've had a couple of experts on this on the show, so I am kind of a believer of it nowadays. Have you
Yeah,
heard of the twin flame theory?
I have. What I and I understand that there are definitions out there that to me sounded like it paralleled my experience. But what I found for me is the more I try to define exactly what occurred and pigeonhole my experience, the less understanding I have about it, almost, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because, I mean, it's anything that goes into past lives or just time in general is wormholes, and you're going down these wormholes, and you're just gonna lose yourself in an even deeper wormholes of different segments of it. It's
Yeah,
just the way it goes. It's just the way it
yeah.
goes. Yeah.
It was. Sorry, oddly my TV just decided to come on. Things like this happen to me all the time.
Do you live in a possessed or haunted house by chance?
No, I don't. Well, in a manner of speaking, as I'm spending time with my wife as we sit as I write, um, we'll be having a particular discussion or something, and the music that comes on my music stream is almost word for word what we're talking about.
Huh.
Really kind of odd. I hate to do this, but I'm going to run over there and turn it off because can you hear it?
Oh, yeah, I can. So please go ahead. It's
Yeah.
fine. Which it's interesting, folks, because we've had people talk about this on the show before, but Tim does something interesting called automatic writing or scrying,
There we
as
go.
some people call it.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple people on that can do this. I've actually had people do it on the show in front of me, like to prove it to me. And one was the Philadelphia medium. I cannot remember her name for life of me right now. I'm sorry. I can't remember your name. But she. So how does your automatic writing work? Because everybody's works differently, from what I'm told.
Right. The way it actually started. After my wife passed, and I became aware that I could sense her presence. I would go on early morning walks, and we would just have discussions. And I would come back, and I would try to write it down, just to remember what we talked about. I had an injury in 2000. I fell and broke my back pretty badly, and so it got to the point where I couldn't go on those walks. And it was really, I felt sort of disconnected from her because I didn't have that ability to go on those very early morning walks and have those very quiet moments. One morning, instead of feeling like I was supposed to get up and walk, I just felt very impressed to get up and get a blank piece of paper and a pencil. And I just wrote the next few words that came to my mind, and I ended up writing 9 pages. So the way it happened to me was almost, it's a natural thing that I do. It is not something I've trained to do or studied to do. I've since read up on it, but that first writing occurred in May of 2020. And since that time, I've got about 400 I would suppose you call them letters from my wife. And it can be anything from um, guidance on how to deal with our kids. Um, we've got 6 kids between us, 13 grandchildren. Or it could be something about a friend, or it could be something very personal in my recovery from my injury, or it could be something very profound. Um, and about a year ago, um, it became really clear that I needed to start putting it into a book and share some of these things with people. So that's where the book came from.
Interesting. And actually, Johnny Midnight, what's going on, buddy? Glad to have you watching again as always. Uh, he says it happens all the time to him as well that he'll say a word and it repeats itself by the TV or radio, or he sees it in print immediately, which that's synchronization. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Synchronization kind of shows that the universe works in mysterious ways, and I mean, it happens to everybody. You see the same time on the clock every time you look.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You something you're thinking about just happens. Someone you're thinking about will stop by your house or stop by your job just randomly without planning. And synchronization is a real thing in this world. So, yeah, Johnny, that's what you're talking about, and we all experience that to some degree. But I mean, as far as the book goes, has your wife given you any? Is any of it say like kind of like future stuff? Like, is she like kind of helping you like with what the future's going to hold, or is it more
Not
just a general
not the future
advice?
in general, but she has been encouraging me as I move along this journey towards a healthier life. Um, I spent a couple of years in a wheelchair. Um,
Okay.
I've been on high doses of pain medication for a very long time. Um, and she's been telling me for years now, 3 or 4 years, that I would experience life without pain. And that was really hard for me to understand. But it's coming true. I'm not taking pain medication anymore. Um,
Well, that's a good thing. That's
yeah,
definitely a good thing.
it's a real good thing. My life is a little slower than it was, but that's a good thing too. Um,
Of
you know,
course.
well, anything's better than being in a wheelchair, I would suppose. But yeah, so yes, future things, but it's generally personal. Um, More often, it's a an observation of how things work. Um, why it's easy for me to do this. Um, you know, the fact that actually anybody can do this on some level. There's no restriction um, at all.
So, with the automatic writing for you, do you just sit in front of a pen and paper and she just talks to you and you just automatically are writing down like what she says, free form kind
Yeah,
of?
pretty much. So I don't write every morning, but there are mornings when I just feels really compelled to just pick up a pen. And
Yeah.
sometimes it almost seems redundant for a minute or two, like it's something we talked about before. But then she'll launch into something, like I say, about our kids, um, giving them encouragement for a situation that they're experiencing, um, or something profound about life in general, uh, something having to do with the experience of being what it is to not be a physical being anymore. Um,
So, does which actually I was going to get to this eventually, but you just kind of gave me a good segue. Does she give you any glimpse into what the afterlife is like, or
yeah, in a manner of speaking, you know, everybody's got, well, not everybody, but those who are in this world of spirit communication are quite often a little bit governed by their beliefs or the system of beliefs that they were raised in, uh, and that comes through in vocabulary a lot. Um, so I'm still restricted in a real sense by the vocabulary of my youth, but I believe that my understanding of her existence and how she's explained it to me is that first, time and physics are completely different. That it allows, from my perspective, that she can be in more places than one at a time. But that's because my perspective is limited. So she can be encouraging my grandchildren at the same time she's talking to me. In my experience, that would be in my view of what time and physics are.
But I mean, it does make sense to some
Yeah,
degree because we all that's been a long believed thing in the afterlife is that you're not held down to any of the rules of physics as we know them. But
right.
which why would you be? I mean, it'd be kind of cruel to have to be in spirit form but still have to like do everything a
Yeah,
human does.
have to walk to the bathroom every, that would be no fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, there's that. There are things I can experience in quiet moments pretty much her entire existence. The problem is I'm stuck with language and I can't explain it. If that makes any sense at all.
It does because I mean we're not meant to be able to
I I
know
can
what
I
happens.
can experience it. I can experience
Yeah.
it. I can't explain it. And that just seems I don't know. Maybe for somebody who does write books, that may be not the best uh, plug for my work, but but it's the truth. Um, Now through the book, you get a really good sense of where we came from, what my experience was to get to the point where I could converse with her, and what it's like afterwards. Um, Now, this first book, I told you I had about 400 interactions with her that I've written about. The first book uses about 14 of them.
Jesus.
Um, and the bulk of the book is trying to explain what she's talking about in those 14 letters. You know, if I if in a letter she says, "Remember when we did this," I need to explain what this was.
Well, of course, yeah.
So there's a lot of that. The next few books are going to be a lot more, a lot less explanation, and a lot more of her, if that makes.
It does. It does make sense. And I mean, just out of curiosity, do you have a plan for how many books you're planning on writing, or is it just
I
up in the
have
air?
I have several medium friends, and the first time I met each one of them, they told me that I would be writing at least 6 books.
Well, I mean, with 400 letters, yeah, that definitely could happen.
Yeah, and the fact that when I first started writing, it needed to be in the morning. So I would wake up. It would be very quiet in the house. I'd make a cup of coffee. I'd go sit in the front room and feel like I needed to write. It's gotten to the point now where we could be done with this podcast, and I could go sit down and write now.
That's
So the access to more information, it's easier. It's actually more profound isn't accurate because it's always been pretty mind blowing, but the subject matter has changed more from my health and things like that to what existence is like, and how the transition from where she was to where she is actually a wonderful thing.
so. Is there a favorite letter of yours in this first book that she wrote to you, basically? Like, is there like one that actually like stands out the most to you?
Let's see. I think so. Let's see. Trying to think. There's one. This is the thing. I started to read this again just to remind myself of what I've done, and I don't know if it's the emotions of having gone through this life, or if it's the emotions of actually having to review it and write about it. But it's hard for me to actually sit still and read this book. I have a real hard time. There's one letter It's on page. The chapter begins on page 195, and it talks about the title of the chapter is "Where Have You Been?" And it talks about all the different the actual letter talks about all the different times in our physical existence where life ebbed and flowed enough that, well, maybe for a period of time I was on so much pain medication that I was literally out of it. I had a hard time staying awake. So as I would come out and go from those times, this theme of where have you been kept coming back. And we kept finding each other, even though we were, I don't know how to say it exactly. We are basically two aspects of the same thing. We share a perspective on the same being, I suppose. But physically, my injury took me away from that for a while. And as I began to feel better, I would come back in, and that would be a moment where this thought of, here you are again, where have you been? The words, where have you been, I've missed you, were the actual first words I heard from her after she passed.
That's beautiful, actually. That's very beautiful, and it's interesting because I mean that whole idea right there of, because it doesn't even have to be like a pain medication thing or I mean, it could just be life gets so busy that you're not really in the same place anymore. Like life just gets too busy. Like it doesn't even have to be for any certain reason. Just sometimes life gets busy and you all of a sudden realize you haven't really had a conversation in like a week or two.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the first time after she passed, we had planned. She had been ill for 15 months. We knew she was going to die. We knew it, and we just assumed that we would be together afterwards. We didn't plan on how that would work. We just assumed we would be able to do it. So about a week after she passed, I started thinking, hey, I'm supposed to know how to do this, and I don't. And through a series of little events, I felt, well, maybe I need to go back to where our spiritual journey began this lifetime. And so I started searching for the book on tape that we had listened to when we first started Spiritual Journey. And it took a little bit to find it, but I actually downloaded it and put in some earbuds, went outside to get the house ready for a memorial service. And 15 minutes into that audio, I heard someone behind me. And I thought it was the neighbors. We're in a busy neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I didn't think too much of it. But then I heard it again. And I mean, just body chills all over. I took the earbuds out and I heard it a third time audibly. And it was, where have you been? I've missed you.
Well, I mean, you found the link to get back to it pretty fast. A lot faster than most people would.
I think that this is the unusual thing, for me anyway, because through my injury and her illness, we actually did learn how to have quite an intimate relationship without being able to touch each other. So we were kind of in training for the lifestyle I'm in now, where we are not physically together. We were in training for that for nearly 20 years.
Interesting. And I mean, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there is something out there called spectrophilia. It's actually intimate relations with a ghost.
Oh, well.
I mean, it's one of those fringe topics in the paranormal. It's funny because actually the one expert I had on the show was actually a former male porn star, but and it was an interesting conversation, but to say the least. But I mean, it's one of those things that I don't know I fully can believe in or think is real because it seems too like ridiculous in a way.
I don't know about that, but I can tell you when I'm writing, I can feel her physically against me. There is on my early morning walks, I would come back and the side of my body where I sensed her presence would physically be warmer.
I mean, it makes sense. It's all energy, so it does make
It,
sense. I mean,
it does, and we had spent so much time becoming in tune with each other, um, that it was really just a natural progression to the next stage. Um, so I really do believe that anybody has the ability to have full conversations with anyone who's passed, who's crossed over. I have no doubt about that. The thing of it is you need to be able to believe that you can do that in order for it to come to pass.
I mean, yeah, it's the thing with any type of paranormal spiritual abilities is there's to unlock them, you have to basically be clear-minded and looking for them. You can't just. It's very rare that these things just fall into people's laps. I mean, it happens. It happens. You're born with it. It pops in your lap from an early age sometimes, but it's a lot easier to find it then because you're a kid and the spiritual world's open to you at that age. So,
That's true.
but I mean, once you become an adult, we have so many distractions, so much busyness going on that we just don't get to focus on stuff like that. And I mean, trust me, I've been trying for years. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come easy.
It's for me it was such an absolute necessity. Um, if I felt separate from her, I would not know what to do with myself. And those moments come and go. It's not like I completely skipped a grieving process. It doesn't matter how connected you are with your loved one. There's still a body that's not there.
Yeah,
There's still activities that you don't do. I wake up and still half the bed's not slept in. That's a thing. You can't get away from it. But I already know that. I wake up in the middle of the night. I can feel her hold my hand as I go to sleep every night. There's an energy in my hand. So I don't. While I am definitely by myself, I am not alone.
and that's amazing. It really is. It's incredible. It's what everybody who's in a relationship they actually care about wants the end to be like. Because
Yeah,
one of us, unless it's some kind of freak accident, one of us always goes first. That's just the way it has to happen.
yeah. We had thought that she would be better suited to have stayed than me. I was disabled. I didn't have a job. She was a breadwinner. We just thought that if we're not in a car wreck together and go off on our own together, that she was better suited. And of the fears I had in my life at that time, being alone was the big one. I did not want to be alone. And for her, being nauseated was something that just she couldn't take it. So she wound up with gastric cancer and was nauseated for 18 months. And I find myself by myself, and it couldn't be more perfect.
Which it's kind of ironic. That's the way it works a lot of times. It happened
Yeah, I know.
with both my grandparents. Like we always said, like the wrong one went first because the other one would have been a lot easier to manage and deal with in their old age by themselves. Like they would
Yeah,
have been a lot more self-dependent. But things happen for reasons, and we can't do anything about that.
right.
And it's just you gotta. I don't know. There's a reason that my grandmother refuses to leave the house that her parents built that she spent her whole life in with her husband and the kids and everything. She refuses to leave it, and I think part of it's because she still feels my grandfather there at times.
I wouldn't doubt it. That's a real thing, and it's good. It's wonderful. Sometimes it's not easy to express. So there are a lot of people who feel these kind of things that don't have the tools to talk about it,
Of course,
or the or
as
the or the courage, because you can be looked at like you're not quite totally there.
There's always going to be those people who believe that type of
Yeah,
thing. Anytime you say anything slightly out of the ordinary, but I mean, and like the show's called, the paranormal is the new normal because stuff like this, we you wouldn't be on a show talking about something like this 10, 20 years ago. It just wasn't something that people talked about, or I mean, unless it was like on Coast to Coast with Art Bell or one of
yeah,
those random offshoot shows that actually existed. But other than that, like you didn't go on regular radio shows or regular TV shows like talk shows to talk about this type of stuff. Like it just maybe Oprah, maybe I don't know, but
yeah.
it's just I mean it's one of those things. It's so in your future books, what's the plan for them? Is it just going to be more stories about the two of you together, or is it going to be stories that are lessons for that are for others?
It'll probably be a combination of both. The next book, I was going to write a book about healing, um, and then my healing journey kind of took off in a direction I wasn't anticipating. So this next book is basically a compilation of about 90 letters from her on her wisdom,
Nice, and which I mean,
her perspective of what life is like, sometimes for me, sometimes for others, um, from a view that is a little bit more expansive, where she sees more circumstance. Um,
does she go into world events at all, or like since she's passed?
rarely,
Rarely.
rarely. Um, it I don't know. I've gotten to a place finally where I can actually ask questions. I mean, seriously, the first week I was doing this, I asked a question and she told me to shush because it wasn't time, because I would get distracted. Now our letters are more conversational. She'll start saying something, I'll make an observation, she'll answer that observation. So um, the evolution of this process is nowhere near complete. I know what the
Of
next
course.
kind of two books will be like, but it took a year to write the first one. It's going to take about another 6 months to get the second one published. Um, and by that time, I don't know what other material I'll have. Uh,
Of
I've
course.
got 90% of the second manuscript done. Um,
That, that's what's up.
so and for me, this is quite a challenge because my language skills pretty much stopped in eighth grade.
Yeah.
And excuse me, thank heavens, I found an editor who was a language instructor for 50 years at grade school and through the university level. Um, so I got really lucky. Um, but my first manuscript came back from her. It looked like one of my high school tests came back with a lot of markings on it. So I learned. So um,
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of authors. Publishing a book, no one has ever said it's easy. No one has ever said it's an easy process. It's a lot of rejection. That's what I've been told.
yeah, it's a challenge for me personally. Um, the subject matter was deeply personal, so it was an emotional challenge to the point of being physical. Um, I could only work on it for an hour or two a day before it would be physically draining. Um,
I can imagine. I mean, you're pouring through memories. So of course, it's going to be
yeah,
draining because
yeah. I mean,
look.
so I had written the book and I sent it off to the publisher and the editor, and they said, "Well, we need a chapter on your wife's illness." And we're like, "Oh crap! I don't want to do that." Um, but we wrote a whole chapter on her cancer journey. Um,
Which, as everybody knows, that's not an easy journey
it
be
was
a
not.
pass to be a passenger on or be the driver of. It's not an easy journey for anybody involved.
I was physically unable to really move around. Um, During her ordeal, I drove her to the first hospital appointment when she was first diagnosed because she had been unable to eat or drink for several days, and she was so dehydrated she couldn't stay awake. So I drove her to the hospital, and we were there for 3 weeks.
Jeez.
I drove her to the last hospital visit because I had to actually get her to the car in a wheelchair. Other than that, she drove to every single chemo, radiation, doctor's visit. Together, we were just a mess. I mean, really a mess. I could barely walk, and she was exhausted and losing weight. And it was quite the thing. It was quite the thing.
Yeah, I mean, journeys like that are never easy for anybody, and my heart goes out to you for having to go through it. It really does.
Well, I appreciate that. Before she was ever diagnosed with anything, several months before, we actually were aware on a spiritual level that her physical time was done, that it was going to be just, we didn't know if it would take a year or 2 years, but she got really sick one day with no explanation. She just started to vomit, and we just knew. We just knew. And so I was able to, through that process, go through the grieving. We went through grieving together. She helped me plan my physical life without her. I was just thinking about this the other day. She actually wrote the check for her memorial service.
Which that does happen, but
yeah,
it's
it's like we were sitting there talking to the people. We knew that she was going to be gone in a few months, and she was still the boss. So,
well, I mean, if you're going to go out being the boss. That's the best way to do it. Like,
absolutely, and
in charge to your final day.
in a very real way, she's still the boss. I mean, it's true. I have to do the physical part of it, but I'm glad to have somebody that has a better perspective than I do counseling me on every decision.
Are there any particular? Oh, actually, okay. This is actually a better question than what I was going to ask anyway. Does she ever like to, poke fun at you when she's having you write the letters, like remind you of things in the past she did that were foolish?
Okay, so
typical wife stuff.
She does, but this is a simple one, and it's kind of illustrative of where I have a very large dog. I didn't want the dog. She convinced me after she passed away to get the dog.
What breed?
He's a German Shepherd. He's a 150-pound German Shepherd. He's a very big guy. And it turns out he's been really helpful.
I'm sure. I mean, I got two North American Mastiffs, and so I know I know what it's like to have big dogs. And
yeah, he's carried a case of Gatorade. My mailbox is 100 feet away from the streets, 100 feet from my front door. He's carried a case of Gatorade for me.
Jeez, my dogs are too stupid to do that. But
having a smart dog is not all it's cracked up to be. At any rate, so we play Frisbee every morning. And, I'll go out and play Frisbee. I'll come in and write. And she'll be razzing me about how poorly I throw a Frisbee. It's not the dog's fault you can't catch it. You're throwing it poorly. So there's a lot of back and forth. I was working in the garden one day, and I was thinking out loud, it would really be nice if I had some help here. Why don't you get your hands dirty? And it was just quick as could be. I don't have hands.
I like the wit behind that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't have hands. So very little has changed. What has changed is she's not driving me around to do stuff, and she's not participating in the physical aspects of things. I sense her with me, but naturally she's not stirring the pasta. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But if I get distracted, I will get a reminder to go check on the pasta.
which is helpful, which is
It
very
is.
helpful.
It is. So I don't know if that answers those kind of
It
questions.
does. It,
I mean,
no, it
there's
does.
some personal things that I just probably will never share, but,
Oh, no,
but
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
yeah, but in general, yeah, she's got the same sense of humor she always had. Um,
Which is great. I mean, it just shows that after death we don't change. Our personalities stay the same.
Absolutely. And to me, that's one of the things that makes me know that this is real. A lot of people ask me how I know. Well, while we were incredibly close, we were still two separate people with different ideas and ways of expressing it. So if I were to sit and write you an email, it might take me an hour to write 3 paragraphs. If I sit down and write for my wife, I'll write those same paragraphs in 10 minutes. It's a totally different thing. My fingers aren't good enough to use a computer, so I handwrite. And generally, um, if I don't let myself get in the way, it comes across very coherent from the very beginning. I can write 9 pages, and maybe all that's missing is punctuation.
Which, I mean, that's incredible. It really is. And got got to ask this though, because since you
Sure.
were brought up religious, religious, because I got to ask, and has she mentioned anything about the idea of like a heaven or a hell in the afterlife?
Um, I'll try to boil it down because we have talked about it. Um, Heaven and hell are human constructs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she refers to her where she is as her natural state, if that makes sense. It is, and she's very clear that she can occupy the same, because our physics are different, like we discussed. She can occupy the same physical space. She's not gone anywhere. So to think of the heaven I was taught as a child of someplace different, a city of gold, something like that. That doesn't necessarily need to exist for her to exist.
And there's no such construct as hell either. Really, there's no, at least that she's been
Not
made aware of yet.
not that I understand. Now, I know that can rub people the wrong way, but I've not experienced anything in our relationship, either before she passed away or since, that would make me believe that if you do something that the world sees as bad, that you're going to go burn in hell forever.
Which, I mean, I am very anti-organized religion in the state I'm in now, because people can believe what they want to believe. I'm not going to hate on for anything, but I'm against organized religion completely because it's just, as you said, they're human constructs used as fear-mongering techniques, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually yesterday, about how much of my early life was solely based on fear. We didn't behave right because it was the right thing to do. We were petrified that first we would get in trouble at home and that we would go to hell for it.
Yep.
Well, everything was based on that, and that's what we didn't want our kids when we first came together. That's what we didn't want our kids to have to grow up with. I don't. My kids are several of them are very much into organized religion, and that's a wonderful thing for me. But it's because they chose it, not because they're like my great grandfather and
Yeah.
following a generational path that they had no choice in.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's funny how things change in 30 years' time, because 30 years ago, the idea of not going to church was foreign to me, right? Like, the families that did that, my friends' families that did that, they were the families that our parents let us hang out with them, but it wasn't exactly kosher.
Yeah.
Those were the bad kids because their parents didn't take them to church, and I I I don't take my kids to church because I don't think they need it. I mean, we I've explained to them the theory of what churches believe for the most part, and I've explained to them the theory about what I believe, and let them find a happy medium. It's not going to be my choice to put them in where I want them to be. They're going to figure it out themselves eventually.
Uh, that's very true. That's very true.
I mean, I mean, if they want to go to church one day when they get older, then fine. I gladly would drive them. I don't care. It's it's their choice. It's just I don't want to. I don't think it should be pushing anybody. I really don't.
That
And as scary as that might be, that America is trying to get back to that, I don't freaking know. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing to push people into anything that they don't want to be a part of.
I think some of our smartest people are kids. So let them
Yeah,
figure it out.
100%. 100%. And the last question I'll ask, because I have to ask this. Where
Sure.
anybody who communicates with the beyond, I have to ask this. What do you and well your wife believe about reincarnation?
Well, again, that's kind of a term that different groups of people have different ideas of what that means. Um, if you talk to some people, reincarnation means that you're progressing through um, different levels of life towards a perfection. And to me, reincarnation is just the next life that I get to spend with her, the next physical life. Um, we realized a long time ago that we had been together previously. And so the journey was, well, if we've been together before and we're together now, why can't we be together in the future, in some future existence, whether it's in a physical life or in an afterlife where maybe we're beings of light or however you choose to describe it. But for me, reincarnation just means the next step. If,
I
if,
mean,
that, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, it does make sense. I mean, the first theory of reincarnation you said, like about the having goals to get to that almost to like a heaven type place or some
Uh-huh.
kind of reward. That is one of the main theories of what reincarnation is. But I mean, it's also been hypothesized on this show and others that reincarnation just means some people believe it's voluntary, that you get to choose if you want to do it again and if what you want to be, whether it be human, animal, non-human species, whatever you want to be. Because I mean, these people also believe in extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials,
Mhm.
that type of stuff. But I don't know. I'm in the middle of it all because I really just don't. I don't know what to think. I mean, I've seen proof of it. I've seen enough proof of it to know that it's possible. But the part that gets me is whether it's voluntary or involuntary, whether we
Right.
have the choice in it or not. Like
I
that's the
believe we
part that
do. I believe we do. One of the, I'm going to wind up paraphrasing my wife, but she says, what we find enjoyable is jumping into the sea of life holding hands. And when you get into the ocean of life, the currents can separate you. And the true joy that we have is finding each other again and swimming to shore. That being,
makes
we
sense.
we have, like I said, we've been together previously before this life. I believe that wholeheartedly. If that's the case, what would keep me from believing that it could happen again or it would happen again? Why wouldn't it?
Which exactly. I mean, I'm a huge believer in past lives. I've talked to enough past life regressionists to know that this really does happen and exist. People can see their past lives if they work with these transgressionists, and that I mean that's where the idea of what we talked about earlier, twin flames, comes in too. Is it's a past life thing. Like if it, we may not even be partners in every life, but in some way or form, we're with each other in every life, whether it's as siblings, as parent
Mm-hmm.
child relationship, or somehow those people always interact with each other. I mean, the whole it's the whole Romeo and Juliet thing, like the fact that you're meant to be the same person every life, like that you're going to come back and find them again somehow, some way. And part of me has to believe that's true. I mean, as a married man, I have to believe that's true because you, if I mean, well, if you do it right, if you do marriage right, you find the person that's you're connected with.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody does it right, because divorce rates will argue with me on that one. But it's, for those who do, it's lovely. It's just a lovely thing. It really is. As an experiencer of it, it's true. It's a lovely thing to find
Yeah.
that person that you connect with and that gets you down to the deepest part of your core. But before I let you go, before I let you tell people where they can find your book, what is your advice for people who are trying to find a way to connect to a loved one that passed?
There's some really simple things that you can do. I suppose the easiest one, the guy that wrote the foreword for my book, Richard Martini, has a podcast, Hacking the Afterlife, and he's written 9 books, 10, maybe 11 now. He
I
writes
know that
books.
name.
Yeah, he
I know
writes
that name.
books. Yeah, he writes books like I sleep. At any rate, so one of the things that in his podcast that they've come across is the easiest way to connect to somebody is to find a joyful moment, maybe a photograph. Just look at the photograph of the person you want to connect with, and find a joyful place in that, and start asking questions. Just ask questions, and allow your imagination to respond. You know, ask a question maybe you don't know the answer to.
I like that.
And maybe you don't get a response right away. Maybe not. Maybe it's a year from now. Maybe it's a week from now. But sooner or later, you'll actually hear a response before you formulated the question.
As creepy as that sounds, yes, I mean, that would be amazing.
So you like, um, it works. For me, when I was first getting started, I made sure that I looked at a few pictures of my wife before I wrote. Some before I knew some of the photographs I had were before I knew her. Some of them were of joyful moments that we had had together. But it really does open you up as a channel, as someone who's open enough to communicate and hear. It has a lot to do with how much you believe, but just allow that it's possible. You don't have to be like standing fully in the, I'm a medium camp. Just allow that it might be possible, and it probably will.
Well said. Well said. I like that, and that's a good way to lead the episode. So I like it. I like it a lot. So where can people find your book, Tim? Where can they find you if they want to reach out? Just promote yourself to the fullest.
Okay. I finally got my website back. TimBair6.com. You can find it there. There's a link for the book there, but it's easiest to find it on Amazon. You can order it at any bookstore, but you've got to have the Library of Congress numbers and all that kind of stuff. If you just go to Amazon, the book is called Ever Near, a series of love letters between soulmates transcending our understanding of life and death. But if you look up Ever Near and my name in any search engine, you'll probably be pulled right into Amazon.
All right, and actually, I think it is true. I think I did Google you to find a picture of the book, and that's the first thing that came up was Amazon. So that is correct. But I want to thank Tim for coming on, ladies and gents, because it's been a great episode, very insightful, very informational, and I love these types of episodes. It doesn't always have to be the spooky episodes. It could be sometimes a more heartfelt, spiritual episode, and those are the ones that my listeners tend to love. So Let's go with it. You gotta go with the crowd, why don't you go sometimes?
Yeah.
But folks, you all know where you can find me. If you don't, shame. But check the outro. It's all there. And I will be back tomorrow with one more interview for the week before I bid you adieu to next week. Until then, have a good night, everybody. And Tim, one more time, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Appreciate it.